The United Kingdom, the island that ruled the world in the far northwest of Europe, lies a cluster of islands, small in size, yet vast in story. For thousands of years, these lands have watched empires rise and fall, seen kings crowned and dethroned, and witnessed the birth of a nation that would one day rule the seas, shape the modern world, and give voice to half of humanity. This is the United Kingdom, a land where myth meets memory, where legends walk beside history. Today, its cities hum with modern life. London's skyline gleams with glass and steel. But beneath every street, beneath every stone, lies an older world, one built by tribes, conquerors, dreamers, and kings. To understand Britain, we must travel back to a time before there was even an England, before flags and borders, before kings and crowns. We must return to the beginning, to the age of mists and myths. Long before history was written, before the Romans or the Vikings, people crossed frozen lands from Europe to settle here. They hunted, gathered, and built simple homes from wood and stone. By 3,000 years before Christ, they built something extraordinary, a ring of giant stones aligned with the stars. Stonehenge. Even now, no one truly knows how or why it was built. Some say it was a temple to the sun. Others call it a monument to the dead. But for those early Britons, it was proof that even in a wild, untamed world, they could shape the earth itself. The Celts came later, tribes who loved music, stories, and battle. They named the rivers and hills. They built hill forts and painted their bodies blue for war. They lived free until the day the eagles came. In the year 43 AD, the Roman Empire set its eyes on the misty island they called Britannia. Legions landed on southern shores. Their shields shone like silver in the rain. Towns rose, Londinium, Eboracum, Camulodunum. Roads cut across the wilderness. Walls marked the edge of empire. For 400 years, Rome ruled Britain. They brought language, trade, and order, but also slavery, rebellion, and war. Then one day, Rome withdrew. The soldiers marched away, leaving behind empty forts, broken roads, and a land waiting for its next conqueror. From across the gray sea came new peoples, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. They came seeking land and power. They fought the remaining Britons and took their lands. Over time, their kingdoms grew. Wessex in the south, Mercia in the middle, Northumbria in the north. Their language blended and changed, becoming the first form of what we now call English. For a moment, it seemed peace might come. But across the northern sea, a new shadow stirred. The Vikings, fierce warriors from Norway and Denmark, came with axes and fire. They raided villages, burned monasteries, and carved their marks into the coasts. Towns fell. Kings died. The land was split, part ruled by the Norse, part still free under the English. And in this chaos, one man rose, Alfred of Wessex. Later called Alfred the Great, he fought not just with sword and shield, but with wisdom. He built forts, trained armies, and taught his people to read and write. For the first time, the dream of a united England was born, a dream that would survive every storm to come. From the builders of Stonehenge to the warriors of Wessex, these early centuries carved the soul of Britain, a land of courage, a land of survival. And though many would come to rule it, from Normans to kings, from empires to parliaments, this island would never lose its voice. The next chapter was waiting, a story of conquest, unity, and the birth of a kingdom. After centuries of invasions, battles, and broken tribes, the island of Britain began to change. Out of many small kingdoms, one would rise to unite them all. Its name was England, the land of the Angles. By the early 900s, a single king ruled most of the land south of the Humber River. His name was Athelstan, grandson of Alfred the Great. Through battle and diplomacy, he brought together the Saxons, Angles, and Britons under one crown. For the first time, there was one ruler, one law, one England. But peace never lasted long. Across the sea, new enemies watched with envy. The Vikings still raided from the north, and now the Normans of France had their eyes set on the island. In the year 1066, everything changed. The English king, Edward the Confessor, died without a son. Three men claimed the throne: Harold Godwinson of England, William of Normandy, and the Viking king Harold Hardrada. First came the Vikings. They landed in the north, fierce and ready. Harold's army rushed north and defeated them in a bloody battle at Stamford Bridge. But as they celebrated, word came that William had landed in the south. Harold marched his tired men hundreds of miles to face the Normans. The two sides met at Hastings. The English formed a strong wall of shields, and for hours they held their ground. But William was clever. He tricked the English into breaking their wall, and his knights cut them down. When Harold fell, an arrow through his eye, England fell with him. William of Normandy became William the Conqueror, the first Norman king of England. The Normans built stone castles, grand cathedrals, and a system of rule that would last centuries. They brought new words, new laws, and a new class of nobles. The English language itself began to change, a mix of Saxon and French that would one day become modern English. The Normans ruled with iron hands. But in time, England grew stronger, richer, and more organized. Power passed from one king to another, from William's sons to Henry I, then to King John. John's greed and cruelty made him one of the most hated kings in history. His barons rebelled and forced him to sign a great document, the Magna Carta, in 1215. It said that even the king must obey the law and that the people had certain rights. It was the first spark of democracy, born from rebellion and written on parchment. As centuries passed, the English crown fought to control Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Some battles were won, others lost. In the north, Scottish heroes like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce rose to defend their freedom. The island that Alfred dreamed to unite would take many more generations to come together. By the 1400s, England faced new chaos. Two great families, the Lancasters and the Yorks, both claimed the throne. Their fight was called the Wars of the Roses, a long and bloody struggle that tore the kingdom apart. In the end, a new king, Henry Tudor, ended the war and became Henry VII, the first of the Tudor dynasty. His son, Henry VIII, would change England forever. He broke away from the Catholic Church after the Pope refused to let him divorce his wife. He declared himself head of a new church, the Church of England, and closed the monasteries that had stood for hundreds of years. For his people, it was a time of fear, faith, and confusion. But it was also the birth of something new, a truly independent English kingdom free from Rome. Henry's daughter, Elizabeth I, would lead England into a golden age. She defeated the Spanish Armada, expanded trade, supported art, and built a sense of national pride that would last for centuries. Under her reign, England became powerful, confident, and ready to step onto the world stage. By the dawn of the 1600s, England was no longer a land of scattered tribes or rival kings. It was a single, united nation, strong, ambitious, and dreaming beyond its shores. But even greater change was yet to come. Soon the island kingdom would become something far larger, a union of nations, and one day, an empire. By the early 1600s, England was powerful, but it was not alone on its island. To the north stood proud Scotland, ruled by its own king, James VI. When Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603 without a child, her closest relative was that very King of Scotland. And so the two crowns were joined on one head. James became James I of England and James VI of Scotland. For the first time, the two great kingdoms shared a ruler. It was the first step toward what would one day be called the United Kingdom. But the union was not peaceful. England was changing fast. New ideas about power and religion divided the nation. Kings believed they ruled by God's will, but Parliament wanted a voice. This conflict grew until, in 1642, the country was at war with itself. The English Civil War had begun. On one side stood King Charles I and his royalists. On the other stood the Parliamentary Army, led by a strict and determined man named Oliver Cromwell. For years, battles raged across the land, father against son, brother against brother. In the end, the Parliament won. The unthinkable happened. A king was tried for treason by his own people. In 1649, Charles I was executed in London. The monarchy was gone, and England became a republic ruled by Cromwell. For a short time, the experiment worked. Cromwell called himself Lord Protector and ruled with discipline, banning luxury and pleasure. But the English people longed for their old traditions, their crown, their celebrations. When Cromwell died, the country invited the king's son back to the throne. Thus began the Restoration, with Charles II returning as king in 1660. Under Charles, the kingdom found new life. London was full of energy and ideas, but tragedy struck again. In 1665, the Great Plague swept through the city, killing thousands. A year later, the Great Fire of London burned the heart of the capital. Out of the ashes, a new London rose, with stone buildings, wider streets, and the magnificent St. Paul's Cathedral. In 1688, another great change arrived, the Glorious Revolution. King James II, who wanted to restore Catholic rule, was forced to flee. His daughter Mary and her husband William of Orange took the throne, agreeing to share power with Parliament. From that moment, the monarchy would never again rule without the people's consent. A constitutional monarchy was born, a balance between crown and democracy. Then came 1707. After years of political and economic debate, England and Scotland formally joined together. The Act of Union created a single kingdom, Great Britain. New symbols appeared, a shared flag, shared laws, and shared pride. With unity came ambition. Across the seas, British explorers, traders, and soldiers sailed to every corner of the world. They built colonies in America, Africa, and Asia. The British Empire was beginning, small at first, but growing fast. At home, another revolution began, not with swords, but with steam. In the 1700s and 1800s, Britain became the heart of the Industrial Revolution. New machines spun cloth, mined coal, and powered trains. Cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Liverpool grew into vast centers of work and invention. Factories filled with smoke and noise, harsh but full of opportunity. This new power transformed Britain. Railways crossed the countryside, carrying goods and people faster than ever before. Inventors and thinkers changed the way the world lived. For the first time, Britain led not just with armies, but with ideas, science, and industry. The empire expanded far beyond the imagination of its early kings. By the 1800s, it stretched across continents, from Canada to India, from Africa to Australia. It was said that the sun never set on the British Empire. Ships sailed under the Union Jack on every sea. London became the heart of global trade, the richest city in the world. But even as Britain grew rich and powerful, not all was fair. Millions across the empire lived under British rule without freedom. In the factories and mines of Britain itself, workers toiled in misery. Change would come again, through reform, through protest, and through the voices of ordinary people. Yet in this age of empire, one truth stood above all. The small island that once fought to survive had now become the greatest power on earth. The union of crowns had become a union of nations, and the dream of Alfred, Athelstan, and Elizabeth had finally reached beyond the horizon. The empire stood at its height in the early 1900s. The red of Britain's flag covered 1/4 of the world's map, from the jungles of India to the fields of Canada, from the deserts of Africa to the cities of Australia. The sun truly never set on the British Empire. But behind the glory was a new world that was changing fast. Machines were replacing hands. Cities were growing crowded and smoky. And deep inside Europe, the seeds of conflict were beginning to grow. The Great War, 1914. In 1914, Europe exploded into war. The First World War became one of the darkest chapters in modern history. Britain joined the fight to defend its allies and to stand against aggression. Millions of young British soldiers left their homes, believing they were going to fight for honor and freedom. But what they found instead was mud, trenches, and endless death. At places like the Somme and Ypres, men lived underground for months, surrounded by rats and rain. When they looked up, they saw only barbed wire and smoke. By the time the war ended in 1918, nearly 1 million British soldiers were dead. The empire had won, but at a terrible cost. When the soldiers returned home, the world they left behind had changed. Women had entered the workforce, and people were beginning to question the old ways. The war had shaken faith in kings, empires, and even God. The 1920s brought a strange mix of hope and hardship. Jazz music filled London's dance halls. New inventions like cars and radios connected people like never before. But behind the music and laughter, poverty and unemployment spread. The Great Depression of the 1930s hit hard. Factories closed, families struggled, and many began to wonder if the empire's best days were already behind it. World War II, 1939. Then once again, the world fell into war. In 1939, Adolf Hitler's Germany invaded Poland, and Britain stood up to resist. This time, the fight was not for empire, it was for survival. When France fell, Britain stood alone. German planes filled the skies, bombing cities night after night. During the Blitz, the people of London hid in underground tunnels, singing songs to keep their spirits alive. Winston Churchill, Britain's prime minister, became the voice of courage. He told his people, "We shall never surrender." And they didn't. With help from their allies and from soldiers across the empire, Britain survived the storm. When the war ended in 1945, there was joy in the streets, but also sorrow. So much had been lost: lives, cities, and the old idea of empire itself. After the war, the world began to change quickly. Colonies across Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean demanded freedom. Britain could no longer rule over people who wanted their own nations. In 1947, India, once called the jewel in the crown, gained independence. One by one, other nations followed. The empire slowly transformed into something new: the Commonwealth of Nations, where countries would be connected not by control, but by cooperation. Britain was no longer an empire. It was now a nation among nations. At home, Britain rebuilt. New houses replaced those destroyed in the war. The government created the National Health Service, giving medical care to all citizens, a proud moment that defined a new era. Factories started again, and soon Britain was producing cars, planes, and ships once more. The 1960s brought music, fashion, and a youth culture that changed the world. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and a new spirit of freedom. But the journey wasn't always smooth. Economic crises, strikes, and political change marked the 1970s and 80s. Margaret Thatcher's government reshaped the nation's economy, for better or worse. In 1997, Britain watched as Hong Kong, the last major colony, was handed back to China, symbolizing the true end of the empire. Yet even without an empire, Britain remained powerful, a leader in science, art, and diplomacy. It joined the European Union in 1973, but decades later chose to leave in 2016, a choice known as Brexit. Through every trial the United Kingdom endured, it became a place of diversity, of ideas, and of global influence through culture rather than conquest. Today, the story of the United Kingdom is not one of empire and power, but of resilience and reinvention. From the ashes of wars and the fall of empire, it built a new identity, a modern democracy, proud of its past but always moving forward. As Big Ben tolls over the River Thames and the Union, Jack flutters in the wind, the message of Britain's story is clear. Empires may rise and fall, but a nation's spirit endures forever. The 21st century brought both promise and challenge. London became a modern city filled with technology, art, and culture. In 2005, terrorist attacks shook the nation, but communities stood united, showing strength through adversity. Britain became one of the most diverse nations on earth. People from all backgrounds contributed to music, food, education, and science. The country's identity evolved: global, creative, and open. In 2016, Britain voted to leave the European Union. The decision divided families and towns, creating uncertainty. Yet the nation endured, proving it could face change with courage. In 2020, the pandemic tested Britain again. Empty streets, masked citizens, and overworked doctors challenged the country. Yet acts of kindness, bravery, and community spirit highlighted the nation's strength. Today in 2025, Britain is a nation of contrasts: modern and historical, diverse and proud, small yet influential. Challenges remain, but its identity is strong, a nation defined by courage, creativity, and hope. As Big Ben chimes and the Union Jack waves over London, one truth remains. Empires may fall, but the spirit of Britain endures. The story of this island nation is far from over. It continues to be written by every person who calls it home.